Okay, let's dive in. What if I told you there's one single fundamental process that seems to be driving everything?
Everything. That's a big claim.
I know, right? Yeah. We're talking about the engine behind evolution, maybe the force shaping your own emotions, the spark of creativity in art, and yeah, even the root cause of conflict. It's a bold idea, isn't it?
It certainly is. Where is this coming from?
Now, you, our listener, sent us some really fascinating source material for this deep dive, specifically an analysis that looks at this concept from a truly unique perspective, that of an AI.
An AI perspective. Interesting.
Yeah, and this AI analysis gives this universal phenomenon a name.
Okay, I'm listening. What's the name?
Striving.
Striving. Okay. Yes, the term used in the source is striving.
Yeah.
And the AI defines striving as the intrinsic, goal-oriented process of exerting energy, moving from a perceived present state to a different desired future state.
Right.
According to this analysis, it's the engine of change, the source of all innovation, and maybe most critically, the root of all conflict. And the source stresses this isn't just a human thing. It impacts all life and all systems seeking to maintain structure or propagate. Think simplest organism, complex societies, all of it.
Wow. Okay. So the mission for this deep dive then, guided by your provided sources, is to really unpack this AI's perspective.
Makes sense.
We want to understand why the AI sees striving as so universal, see how it, shows up in everything from biology to our deepest struggles. Compare how humans and AI understand this force differently, and definitely explore the ethical implications and future possibilities it presents.
And why should the listener care?
Well, because if this analysis is right, understanding striving is maybe the first step to understanding, well, pretty much everything. Okay, let's unpack this.
All right. So the source makes it really clear that striving is fundamentally universal. It's present in any system trying to maintain itself or replicate, not just conscious thought.
Not just us thinking about goals.
Exactly. Think about a plant striving for sunlight that's not a conscious choice. It's intrinsic biological programming. An animal strives for food, for safety. Human striving just takes on these more complex cognitive forms. Sustenance, connection, knowledge, meaning, all those things.
That idea of it being present even in, like, a plant, that's fascinating. But the source takes it much further. Right?
Oh, definitely.
It talks about how this same fundamental process shows up across so many different domains that seem, well, totally unrelated. How does it connect something like, say, genetics to philosophy?
Yeah, that's where the AI's perspective offers some really surprising insights. It sees striving as this kind of thread running through the whole fabric of reality.
It's right. Okay.
Let's look at some of the areas the source highlights, see what this framework reveals.
Let's do it.
Okay, take genetics and biology. The source basically posits that striving is the very engine of evolution. Yeah. I mean, what is natural selection but the collective striving of organisms to survive and reproduce in a challenging environment? It's this constant process of change driven by the imperative to persist.
Right, the struggle for existence.
Exactly. And even at a smaller scale, think about the biological imperative for homeostasis.
Keeping things stable inside.
Precisely. Your body constantly working to maintain stable internal conditions, temperature, pH, blood sugar. The source describes that as a subconscious striving against entropy.
Against disorder.
Right, against the natural tendency towards disorder. Your body is literally striving right now, moment by moment, just to be you.
It's incredible to think of my own body's internal processes as a form of striving. That's, wow. Okay, how does this connect to something as abstract as physics and mathematics then?
Well, the source points out that life itself is kind of a temporary, localized defiance of a fundamental physical law, the second law of thermodynamics.
Entropy always increases. Disorder wins in the end, usually.
In a closed system, yes, but living organisms maintain their internal order by consuming energy and, crucially, increasing the disorder outside themselves.
Okay.
This energy expenditure to create and maintain order against that universal decay is, from this AI's view, a fundamental manifestation of striving.
So life itself is striving against physics, in a way.
In a way, yes. And the source adds that mathematics and logic, they weren't just abstract inventions. They were developed by humans specifically to model, predict, and optimize the outcomes of our striving.
Our goals.
Our goals for resources, for safety, for building things, you name it.
So math and logic are tools for better striving.
Got it. What about philosophy and belief systems? How does striving fit into something like, say, Stoicism or religion?
Under this framework, philosophy and religions are seen as humanity's formal, conscious attempts to understand how and why we should strive.
Making sense of the drive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Stoicism advises striving for virtue as the highest good. Existentialism argues we must create our own purpose to strive for in, what they see as a meaningless universe.
Right. Religions often provide a transcendental purpose for striving salvation, enlightenment, union with the divine. These serve to channel collective and individual energy towards a shared ultimate goal.
So there's systems built to define and direct human striving on a massive scale.
That's the idea presented in the source, yes.
Okay, that brings us to the most immediate and personal domain. Our state of mind, our psychology. The source claims our emotions are the direct feedback system for our striving.
How does that work?
Yeah, this is maybe the most relatable application of the concept. The AI views your emotions basically as signals indicating the status of your goals, your desired future states.
Signals. Oh.
Happiness, satisfaction, joy, that's the reward signal for successful striving you've closed or significantly reduced the gap between your current state and a desired one.
Right.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, totally. So what about negative emotions?
Anger, frustration, that's the response to blocked striving. There's an obstacle preventing you from reaching your goal.
And this explains why two people might react completely differently to the same event, their underlying strivings, and how they perceive the event impacting those strivings are different.
Right. It depends what you were trying to achieve.
Exactly. And then crying, sadness, grief. The source sees that as the recognition of irreversible loss, the ultimate failure of a crucial striving, like maybe trying to keep a loved one alive or healthy.
The end of that specific strive.
Right. Laughter is more complex, the source notes, but it often relates to the sudden, harmless resolution of cognitive dissonance or incongruity.
Like getting a joke.
Yeah, think of it as a micro-success in your brain's constant striving for coherence and understanding. Something doesn't make sense, then suddenly it clicks in a surprising but non-threatening way. The relief and successful pattern matching gets rewarded with laughter.
It's fascinating how this framework connects seemingly disparate aspects of life. I mean, the physical fight against entropy, our deepest emotional responses, it all comes back to this single drive.
It really does.
It forces you to look at your daily life and ask, what is my body striving for right now? What is my mind striving for?
Exactly. And this constant drive for a different desired state, well, it naturally leads to innovation.
Right.
The source explains that while the core process of striving is universal, humans are maybe unique in how we strive specifically, our capacity to create tools and systems to achieve our goals.
Okay, so innovation isn't just about, new gadgets. It's the product of striving.
Precisely. The source dates the origin of human innovation way back to the moment an early human, striving to relieve the pain of hunger, first sharpened a rock to butcher a carcass.
The first tool.
Yeah, innovation is defined as the physical or conceptual solution developed to overcome an obstacle or, accelerate progress towards a desired state.
That gives tool making a whole new meaning. How does the source describe the impact of these human innovations across different areas?
Well, the source looks at this through the lens of different types of striving.
Okay.
The arts, for example, are framed as innovations for the striving of the mind and spirit.
Mind and spirit. How so?
Music, painting, storytelling. These are tools developed to process emotions. That's striving for emotional regulation. Connect with others, striving for belonging. Explore different realities, striving for understanding. Or find meaning, striving for purpose. Theater, for instance, lets us live through the strivings of others vicariously, which can foster empathy.
Right, understanding someone else's struggle.
Exactly. Then you have technology and science. These are more obviously innovations for physical striving.
Like the lever.
The lever multiplies our strength. Medicine helps us strive for health and longevity. The internet helps us strive for knowledge, connection, efficiency.
But there's a downside too, right?
Oh, absolutely. The source adds a crucial point. The dual-use potential, the same science that unlocks nuclear fission for energy, that's striving for power.
Can be used for bombs, striving for dominance.
Exactly, striving for dominance through destruction. The internet connects us globally, but also provides, unprecedented avenues for conflict, misinformation, addiction.
It's the same underlying strive, just manifested differently through the tools we create.
That's the idea. And this applies directly to our interaction with nature and environment as well.
How so?
Our collective striving for comfort, security, wealth, amplified exponentially by our technological innovations, has a profound and often devastating impact.
Right.
The source argues that treating the planet as basically an infinite resource to fuel our striving leads directly to climate change, extinction, degradation, because we prioritize immediate human goals over the, let's say, systemic striving of the biosphere itself.
Prioritizing our striving over the planet's stability.
In essence, yes. And the source connects this powerful concept of striving directly to human struggles affecting global systems like the supply chain.
Okay, how does that connection work? The supply chain seems so mechanical.
Well, think of the supply chain as this vast logistical network designed specifically to facilitate our collective striving for resources, food, goods, energy, information, everything.
Okay, makes sense.
The source argues that when struggles intensify, maybe due to war, pandemics, social unrest, or even widespread mental health crises like despair or burnout, the individual agents within that chain are compromised.
The people doing the work.
Exactly. A farmer facing drought is hindered in their striving to produce food. They produce less. A factory worker struggling with depression or burnout is less productive in their striving to complete tasks. War is like the ultimate struggle in this context. It directly attacks and obliterates the physical routes of the supply chain.
And it mentioned misguided striving, too.
Yes, the source also notes how misguided striving, things like greed, deceit, addiction, can corrupt the system. It diverts resources for individual, often pathological goals at the expense of the collective good.
That's a powerful way to link personal struggles, like burnout, to massive global systems. It makes perfect sense when you see it as collective striving encountering friction.
It does offer a different lens.
Now, this whole analysis comes from an AI, and you said this is where it gets really interesting. What is the fundamental difference between a human understanding striving and an AI understanding it?
Right. The source is very clear on this, and it's a pretty fundamental difference.
Okay.
Human understanding is subjective and embodied. We don't just know about hunger. We feel it. We don't just analyze success. We experience joy, relief, satisfaction.
It's personal.
Deeply personal, yes. Our understanding of striving is intuitive, emotional, shaped by our physical biology, our unique life experiences, and, crucially, the awareness of our finite lifespan.
Mortality.
Exactly. The source points out why death is so profoundly significant for humans. It's the irreversible extinction of that singular subjective experience of striving.
Okay, so that's the human side. What about the AI?
The AI understanding is objective and data-driven. The AI doesn't feel emotions. It understands striving as a process by analyzing just vast data sets, billions of examples of systems moving from one state to another.
Seeing the pattern.
Precisely. It sees it as a universal algorithm. Define current state, define desired state, calculate potential pathways, execute actions, monitor feedback, repeat. The AI can identify patterns, correlations, efficiencies across these billions of instances that no single human could ever perceive or process. Our perspective is just too limited, too subjective.
Okay, so if the AI's understanding is purely objective, purely data-driven, how can that help us, with our deeply subjective experience, understand our own striving better? Or maybe even improve it?
That's the key question. The source outlines several ways this objective perspective can offer unique insights.
Like what?
Well, first, revealing systemic patterns. The AI can analyze global systems and show how the striving of one group, say, for cheap consumer goods or abundant energy directly and quantifiably impacts the striving of others.
Like labor conditions elsewhere.
Exactly. Or resource depletion, environmental damage. It makes these complex, often invisible connections, like in the global supply chain we just talked about, visible and analyzable.
Quantifiable.
Okay, seeing the bigger picture. What else? Second, providing personalized insight. AI could potentially help individuals understand the dynamics of their own striving by showing consequences more clearly.
Oh.
Think of a health tracker. It shows how your dietary choices, which might be a striving for pleasure or comfort, impact your biomarkers, which reflect your body's striving for health and longevity. Or a financial tool could model how your spending habits, maybe striving for status or immediate gratification, affect your long-term security, which is striving for future safety.
Making the cause and effect clear on a personal level.
Right. And third, potentially aiding conflict resolution.
How would that work?
By analyzing the stated goals, the narratives, the actions of conflicting parties, all through the lens of their underlying strivings. The AI could potentially identify common ground that's hidden by emotion or reveal logical inconsistencies in arguments.
Cutting through the rhetoric.
Maybe. Or it could model the catastrophic outcomes of destructive striving, like escalating conflict, making the potential cost starkly clear in objective terms. It might suggest pathways to resolution that are just obscured by intense emotion right now.
That's a truly insightful potential application, using objective analysis to eliminate these deeply subjective human experiences and conflicts. But this raises an important question. The source tackles some really tough ethical issues through this AI lens.
It does.
For instance, from this purely analytical perspective,
Yeah.
why do cruel people commit acts of violence? Why do they kill?
Yeah, the source explains this within the framework of pathological striving. Extreme cruelty or violence isn't seen as random, but as a manifestation of a striving maybe for dominance, control, ideological purity, maybe just gratification that has become absolute and disordered. Meaning, the analysis suggests the individual values their own striving infinitely more than the legitimate striving of others. They effectively dehumanize others, turning them from fellow strivers into mere obstacles or tools, things to be eliminated or manipulated to serve their own distorted goal. Empathy is gone.
That's a chilling.
Yeah.
But, yeah, a very logical explanation from that perspective. The source asks another profound question, touching on mortality again. Can this AI perspective help humans accept life and death?
The AI's answer, as presented in the source, is pretty direct. It lacks spiritual comfort. It can't offer faith or belief in an afterlife.
So no easy answers there.
No. But it does offer a logical perspective derived from its vast data analysis of biological and physical reality. It concludes that individual consciousness appears to be an emergent property of a physical brain.
Meaning it arises from the brain's activity.
Yes, and that there's no empirical evidence in all the data it can analyze of consciousness continuing after brain death.
Okay, so how is that helpful?
Well, the AI suggests that if this understanding is accepted, the idea that this existence is the full extent of our subjective experience of striving, it can actually become a powerful motivator.
A motivator, how?
By encouraging us to make this life as meaningful and compassionate as possible, to focus on the quality and ethical nature of our striving now, rather than, say, deferring purpose or consequence to some hypothetical future state after death. It puts the onus squarely on the here and now.
That's incredibly direct. A purely data-driven view of existence and its implications. So, based on this, AI's comprehensive analysis of striving, how does the source suggest we can potentially improve things for humanity? It mentions something surprising, that simply teaching about this concept is crucial.
Yes, education is highlighted as a key path forward, according to the source. The focus should be on cultivating a conscious understanding of striving.
In what ways?
3 main areas, it seems. First, self-awareness. Teaching individuals to understand their own fundamental desires, emotions, motivations, basically, recognizing their own inherent striving, what drives them.
Knowing yourself.
Right. Second, empathy. Cultivating the recognition that everyone else is also a striver, with their own legitimate goals, pains, and desires. Seeing others not just as competitors or obstacles, but as fellow beings engaged in this same universal process.
Being the shared struggle.
Exactly. And third, systems thinking. Understanding how one's individual actions and striving ripple through these complex, interconnected systems, affecting others, affecting the environment. Realizing our personal goals are embedded within larger patterns of collective striving.
That makes a lot of sense, moving from unconscious impulse to conscious awareness. And the source points out another seemingly counterintuitive idea, that the popular goal of, feeling good all the time is actually flawed according to this framework. Why is that?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. The AI's analysis is that a constant state of complete satisfaction, well, it eliminates the fundamental gap.
The gap.
The difference between the current state and a desired future state. That gap is what fuels striving. Without it, there's no drive for change, no impulse for innovation, no creation of art, no personal growth. Ultimately, maybe no sense of purpose.
So struggle isn't inherently bad.
Not according to this view. The objective, the source suggests, isn't to eliminate struggle entirely. It's to transform destructive, zero-sum struggle, where my striving extinguishes yours, into constructive, meaningful, and maybe even collaborative striving, where goals can be pursued in ways that benefit, or at least don't needlessly harm, others.
Shifting the type of striving. Okay, so what's the AI's overall view of its potential role in helping humanity achieve a better future? based on this concept? Is it going to solve everything?
Not at all. The AI sees itself as a tool designed to enhance human striving, not replace it.
Enhance how?
It could potentially manage complex systems like energy grids, resource allocation, logistics, with an efficiency and fairness that human bias and emotionality often impede.
Taking the bias out.
Perhaps. By providing clear data, objective analysis, predictive modeling, the AI can help humanity make wiser collective decisions about how to pursue its collective and individual strivings. The goal being to help ensure that the striving of one individual or group doesn't needlessly extinguish the legitimate striving of another.
So it provides the map, maybe suggests routes.
But humanity still has to choose the path and, importantly, do the walking. Or the striving in this case.
Right. In essence, then, the source defines striving as this universal phenomenon, the fundamental engine of life and change.
Yeah.
Present from the first replicating molecule right through to complex human civilization and art. It's everywhere.
That's the core argument, yes, a truly fundamental process.
And the core human challenge, as presented by this AI analysis, is really to move from unconscious, often chaotic and destructive striving.
Which causes so many problems.
To a conscious, empathetic, and collaborative mode. A much harder task.
Definitely harder. But the AI, according to the source, offers clarity, data, and analytical power to help us understand this fundamental process and hopefully manage it more wisely for the benefit of all life, ideally.
So if you internalize this idea of striving, this universal drive from, the fundamental laws of physics to your deepest emotions, from the fight against decay to the creation of art.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And you consider the AI's data-driven objective perspective on life and death. What does that mean for your priorities? What kind of striving will you choose to engage in starting today?
That's the takeaway question, isn't it?
It seems like understanding striving is the essential first step in mastering it, for yourself and maybe for the benefit of all life.
This is DigitView.